wabarakatuh. We are group 7 and we will be talking about language shift, and we are
Wait a damn minute.
Laila.
Dijo.
The definition of language contact is when two people who speak different language communicate with each other, and it often resulting in behavioral expectation, cultural interchange, and a speech pattern. And so, language contact is just
Hold up. Wait a minute.
language contact is divided by 4 categories, which is bilingualism, multilingualism, which means that speakers use multiple languages in their daily life. Language convergence, which means languages become more similar in structure and vocabulary due to contact. Thirdly, language divergence, which means languages become more distinct due to contact, often resulting in language shift. And for the lastly, Pidgins and Creole. Pidgins and Creole are simplified languages emerged from trade for communication purposes from the olden days.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Israel Irfan bin Isma Hazam, and today we are going to discuss about our first article, which is by Jonathan Dunn and Sydney Wong. So, without further ado, let's get started. And to much more concise this, I divided it by research focus, research purpose, method, respondent details, and last but not least, the key ideas that we're going to go through. So, let's go over the research focus of this article, and that is to investigate why some English dialects are more grammatically correct than others, which means that some uses of dialects between the English in English are much more, I'd say, their grammar is much more correct than any other languages. Like for example, the English language, perhaps this is just an example, is much more correct grammatically rather than the American English, so on and so forth. So that is the first of our 5 topics, subtopics, which is to investigate why some are grammatically correct than others. So let's go over the research purpose on this article, which is the main aim of this article is to find out whether language contact, population contact, or geographical distance plays a bigger role in shaping the similarities of the dialects between the dialects. In English, there are so many dialects. There are Asian dialects of it, and subtopic of that, there's Chinese dialects, accents, and whatnot, and so on and so forth again. And these 3, language contact, population contact, geographical distance, plays one of the most bigger key findings of shaping the English dialect that are much more grammatically correct than others. And let's go over to the method of it. The researchers used a social media platform called Twitter, and they collect their data from 256 cities across 13 different countries to comprehend or to understand how English is widely used in places. For example, one of the most key findings I've seen is how they use English language in Europe, for example, Asia or Americas, and how it shapes the dialects to be much more consistently grammatically correct. And for the respondent details of it, I'd say there's no direct contact, but there's no direct contact between the respondents, but since we don't know their age, their occupations, that might affect the further of their research and studies. Online, only their language was analyzed, how their language usage online from Twitter was used. And last but not least, the key idea of it. The key idea of this whole article is to show that language contact and geographical closeness explains the similarities between one another. So I guess that's all I have for Article 1. Let's get over to Article 2. Article 2 by Yuan 2024, the whole network approach. So let's get started. The purpose of this article, of this study, of this research is to study how biased self-reports are by students in studies abroad using language use, which means that how they use their language within their peers and how their peers reported the findings and how they self-reports the finding themselves to the reports. Right, so let's get over with the respondents. The respondents are mainly university students that studies abroad in groups, and they have to give self-reports or peer reports, the reports about their peers, and rate them by their language use, how they often use their language, their native language, and or English, for example. English mainly, yes, main English. So the method of the studies is the researchers use social network analysis to map out every single interactions between this student and this student and this student with this student, and compare the reports of number one, self-reports, and number two, self-reports, and network the data that they have based on those two reports. Right. So the findings are from this research, there are highlights of mismatch between the self and peer reports, and how the student underestimate their language use, like I said earlier, with English and or their native language, for examples. And overall, the only thing that was accurate about this data is the network data itself. The network data shows the real pattern of interactions between the students that studies abroad in groups and whatnot. So let's get over to the implications of this research. Implications are, I'm just going to simplify it, how self-reports and or peer reports also are not that reliable in this case. And combined with like peer and network data, it proves to be a much more accurate data in the research article as well, and how they map it out. But those are very, very accurate in terms of this. Only peer and network data are accurate in this case, not and totally not self-reports. And to conclude it all, language learning is social, which means that you interacting with your friends using English and or your native language, and how they report it to the researchers are much more open. Language learning is social, which means how you study it with your friends, not just individual. And that's all.
Mr. Guzman, and here both articles explore language contact but in two different scales, which is macro level and micro level. For Article 1, which is global direct, it focuses on large and global patterns. For Article 2 is whole network approach, which is individual interactions. Okay, moving on. Article 1 studies dialects currently across the world. The finds are English dialects are influenced more by online linguistics, which is travel or overseas, and environment than physical movement, which turns into from geographic spread changed into linguistic input or environment. Problems are using air travel to measure contact is weak, and then also a tourist in an airport does not equal to an immigrant leaving a language. Furthermore, on this is the study large scale makes it impossible to see real social interactions, which thus creating a method gap. For Article 2, looks at peer-to-peer contact where language change actually happens. Finds are self-reported contact data is often unreliable because two things. People tend to overestimate and then inconsistent details, which in terms making surveys and logs not really worth it. And then key and issue for debate is if micro level data, which is real human contact, is unreliable. Question: how can macro level digital data, what's that? Data online language use be trusted? By Dun and Wong, macro, they prioritize on large scale computational data, and then for Wong is micro. They focus on methodological accuracy. And the main question would be: can big global findings be valid if the basic data about interaction is weak? That's all for me.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Jijo again, and today we're going to go over the overall discussions of both articles. So let's start. It shows that both papers enhance how language contact is studied, but it reveals a key theoretical and some kind of a methodological issues in social linguistics as well, meaning that the global dialect paper, we're going to go over the macro level of it, shows that local social environments influence English grammar more than anything else, more than travel, migrations, and the language change depends mainly, I'd say, largely based on social value and consistency of contact, not just overall frequency of it. And the key insight that we can take from this is that frequent interactions with second language users, for example, with students from abroad coming from countries, Asian countries, going to English-speaking countries, second language speakers, creates a language filter between them, challenging old distance based models of language variation. And this whole WNA or whole network approach on the micro level finds inconsistency in self-reported language use. English use is reportedly reliable, while Chinese use is often inaccurate due to cognitive effort and some kind of a social status differences once everybody start to know about them. And the research implication we can take from this is how unreliable self-reports are, but mostly and largely due to large-scale findings. That weakens large-scale findings. Researchers, or the ones that do the research, should verify social links and consider how social biases makes before making broad conclusions. Hello again. So for our second part of our discussion is how both studies aims to improve research on language contact by linking digital data online with real-life social interactions for more accurate insights. Is how we link micro and macro levels of intelligence, of self-report, and also how online is, how to link digital data and self-report data, and combines WNA's verified small-scale data with large-scale models to see if precise contact patterns predict language change better than broad measures like travel data. When we go over to our next discussion, our comparing contact modes between this and that, is how study how digital, online, and face-to-face peer presence, peer reports, and self-reports contact affect language differently, especially in grammar and vocabulary use, and how grammar changes slowly, how it affects on language levels, of course, how grammar affects changes slowly under strong contact pressure, while vocabulary and slang shifts faster than frequent surface level interactions. And overall insight that we can take from this is how future research on this, on how language grammar on self-reports and the digital data that we had move beyond simple correlations. It is to uncover how real social connections drives global yet local shape language change. And I think that's all for my discussion on my part. Thank you. Last but not least, let's go over to our conclusion for these both articles, research articles. I provided it in 4 points, and let's go over it right now. Let's go to number 1. The key issue is to how to measure language contact, where both studies highlight a major challenge, which is how to measure and define language contact at different scales, global and local studies. And number 2, Dunn's and Wong's macro study. Their global dialects research shows that local linguistic environment predict grammatical similarity better than physical mobility, shifting focus from geography to linguistic surroundings. Number 3, Wang's micro-study, WNA method. Wang finds that self-reported data can be unreliable, especially for minority languages, and the WNA method, accuracy through network validation and peer checks, stress data quality. And last but not least, number 4, the future direction is to bridge big and good data. Future research should combine, and I say should combine, large-scale digital with verified social data to test whether the quality matters most than quantity, balancing big data and good data for stronger language change theories. And that's all from me, folks, and thank you guys for listening. Bye bye.